Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, and good morning. Welcome to the CSLDallas Science of Mind class. You know, I was thinking of last week, during the past week, that when I was growing up and my parents took me to church every Sunday, we went early and we had Sunday school for the kids and Bible study often, or Sunday school for the adults. I was like, yeah, Sunday school, that's what the Sunday morning Science of Mind class is like. We come in and we get some spiritual grounding, and we, in this case, pay attention to what Ernest Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind textbook, and we chew on it, like we mentally marinate in it and think about how it applies to our lives. My name is Tracy Brown, and this week we are starting on page 417 in the textbook if you are following along. It is about 2/3 of the way through the chapter called The General Summary, where Ernest Holmes summarizes what he has written about for, 380 pages before. And it's really good because I guess by the time you get to 380 or 390 pages in, I guess if you're like me, you need some reminders of what was way back there on page 25 or page 85. And so this particular chapter really gives us an opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper, because for many of the things that are in this chapter, we're actually seeing them, feeling them, hearing them for the third or fourth time. So in this part of the general summary, beginning on page 417, the second paragraph, we are into the differentiation between individuality and or individuation and the distinction between personality. We ended last week with the reminder that, well, I'll just read the reminder part. Other than the instinctive and automatic actions of the physical body, the law knows only about us that which we know about ourselves. Therefore, it makes all the difference in the world what we are impressing upon the law as being true about ourselves. And so that reminder of when we say I am the I am, when we think it, when we say it, we are reinforcing that every attribute and quality of the divine is already implanted within each one of us, and we know it, and we live based on that. So I'm hoping as you went through the week, every time you heard or said I am, like if someone says, how are you? I am, okay, the universe says yes, right? I am. Many of you know that my standard answer is, how are you? I'm fabulous. And then my backup is wonderful. And at the same time, I will always be truthful. So I might be, I'm good and getting better, or I am still waking up, but which is not then attaching a quality to me. It is I'm in the process of doing something. So be really aware whenever you're saying I am, what word or phrase comes out of your mouth right after that phrase. So that's where we ended, and that we are asserting who we are, and that's what the universe is responding to. So let's dive in on page 417, second paragraph. To assert our individuality is to rise above the law of averages into that more highly specialized use of the law, which brings freedom rather than bondage, joy in the place of grief, and wholeness instead of sickness. There's a whole Sunday talk in that one sentence, or a whole 2-hour webinar in that one sentence. And so as much as I want to go forward, I'm reading that sentence again. To assert our individuality is to rise above the law of averages into that more specialized use of the law, which brings freedom rather than bondage, joy in the place of grief, and wholeness instead of sickness. We cannot do this unless we are first willing to, quote, judge not according to appearances. In this judging, we are impressing the law with a new idea of ourselves, a less limited idea, and we are learning to think independently of any existing circumstances. This is what is meant by entering the absolute. We are learning to think independently of any circumstances. This is what is meant by entering the absolute. Now, I'm going to go back to the very first sentence. To assert our individuality is to rise above the law of averages into that more specialized use of the law, which brings freedom rather than bondage. Okay, so I have a love-hate relationship with a lot in our principles. Like, I love it because I know it works and I believe it, and it's like, this is really good stuff. And I quote unquote hate it, right? Because it's like, I'm responsible. Oh, I have to actually do something. I have to actually choose. Like, oh, like, I do want to do that, but there's some days I don't want to do it. There's some days I just want to let the human Tracy take over. And I know all of you are past that point. Like that never happens to you. But there are some days. And that's one reason why it's so helpful to read and study and take classes and be in the conversation all the time. Because when we don't have those reminders, it's just so easy to let the brain and the ego do what they want to do. So when I read this sentence, to assert our individuality is to rise above the law of averages, I am reminded that, oh yeah, the law of averages. What's in the collective consciousness? What's in the culture? What are the majority of people thinking about or accepting as true? What are the social norms? All of that reflects the law of averages, the statistics we believe, the data we get bombarded with. And I can individually rise above that law of averages and influence what happens in my life, or I can just accept that some things that are happening, they are still answers to prayers, because the universe is answering whatever prayer it's receiving, whatever instruction it's receiving, both from us individually and from the collective. So sometimes I will talk to someone and they have been diagnosed with, and I'll even be more specific than that. So it's a woman and she's been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she'll say, well, there's not anybody in my family who's had breast cancer. This is the last thing I expected. Why breast cancer? Why me? All of the things that any of us would say if we were diagnosed, especially if we didn't have a family history, which we've been brainwashed to believe, right? It's genetic. And so there's a collective consciousness in our society that says 3 out of 4 women will experience breast cancer between the ages of X and Y. Well, if I am not consciously, on a regular basis, planting the seed of health and wholeness, I'm more likely, not guaranteed, but more likely to be affected by what's in the cultural consciousness. Now, I could be planting all those seeds and still be someone who is diagnosed with breast cancer, but maybe from a different perspective. Example, I see that face. Example, perhaps my prayer or my desire is I want to go deeper in my faith. I want to know God I want to know like I know nobody can move me from the depth of faith. And it could be that I experience cancer as a journey to deepen my faith. So it could happen even if I am saying, all of the affirmations about health and everything. But the first example was just in general, if I'm not doing anything about good health, the law of averages is going to have a much stronger impact on me than it would otherwise. That's just an easy example, but it applies in the work that we do, it applies in our family life, it applies in our relationships, social and personal. It applies all along. The law of averages is working all the time. But we have the ability to specify what we want, and Ernest Holmes says that the more specialized use of the law, which brings freedom rather than bondage, joy in the place of grief, and wholeness instead of sickness. But we're the ones that have to specify. So how often are you specifying exactly what you want to experience? I don't mean outlining the how it's going to happen step by step and who's going to say what and what's going to happen on this day, but the overall tenor or the overall experience of how you go through life. And I don't want you to answer this out loud, but just review quickly the last 6 days of your life. What have you been specifying by what you say and what you do? So I'm going to go into the next paragraph, and then I'm going to ask you for your comments, your examples, and or your questions. We may be sure that the whole aim of evolution is to produce innumerable selves which are all consciously centered in the universal self. The individual I is a complement to the universal I am. And any method that would seek to erase or to obliterate this individual I must be based upon a false philosophy. But, quote, the Father is greater than I, end quote. This must never be overlooked, for all further evolution of the individual will depend upon this conscious cooperation with the law and with the Spirit. The Spirit is greater than any particular use of the law of cause and effect. So when I say I am the I am an individual example of the greater I am. And the little tweak there is, because I have free will and choice, I get to choose how that expresses or manifests. And there's another place where Ernest Holmes writes about, while each one of us represents the I am, and we are part of the universal body of the one, none of us individually can absorb the whole. We are all a part of the whole. We all have aspects of the whole within us, but the whole is still the whole. So you still have to have the universal collective that is spirit. All right, so that's a good place to stop for a minute, and I'm going to ask Ryan if he will tell all of us how we can participate.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tracy Brown, and welcome to everybody here joining us for the Sunday morning Science of Mind class. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for being right here, right now. Yes. And I do want to mention that this is an engaging experience. I'm looking at all y'all in the room. See my gazing eyes? And I'm looking at all you on the internet. You see my gazing eyes? Just kidding. So for those who are here in the room, the way that we participate is just hold your hand up in the air. Wave it like you just don't care. And myself or the magnificent, iconic Richard over here to my right will pass you the microphone. Please just say your name and then ask your question or comment. That way so folks can hear you online as well too. And for the people who are joining us in the Zoom room, you have a little raise your hand icon located down below, and I want you to smack it. Just tap, tap, hit it. And then you can also put your questions and comments into the room. I see you shaking your head, Tracy.
We do not condone violence.
We do, okay, gently hit the raise your hand button.
The raise your hand.
Caress it with love and kindness. That's what we're about today. And for those who are here joining us on the Facebook world, we see you all over the globe. So thanks whatever time you're watching us right now. And put your questions and comments inside the chat, and I'll bring those here into the room as well. And I do like to mention, I leave the chats anonymous, so that way we have a safe container of spiritual growth. So, before I go to anybody online, I just want to poll the room. Is there anybody who wants to comment or add their feedback? I think I'm a little too amped for everybody this morning. Sorry, I'm on my second cup of coffee. Most people are just waking up and having a good time. Well, I think, Tracy, then let's go a little bit further into the Science of Mind book, and as things pop up, I'll just raise my hand and bring it into the room. How about that?
That would be fabulous. This section that we've already covered on page 417 is, I don't know if it's a wake-up call, but it is one of those, at least when I read it, I'm like, okay, I know I can rise above the law of averages, but it's up to me to use a more specialized use of the law. So where does Ernest Holmes go from there? At the bottom of 417, last paragraph, if we believe that as isolated personalities, we are able to heal through mental and spiritual methods, we shall be likely to fall into the error that it is human will that accomplishes the desired good. And perhaps our human willpower will someday tell us that it no longer has the strength to keep on working, that it is tired, or that it no longer has the inspiration to continue. It is evident that we must not allow ourselves to think this way if we wish to accomplish anything worthwhile. Okay? So don't be guilty of thinking because you are directing the law that you are actually doing the transformation. You are doing the change. We need a microphone over here on my left because this is one of the biggest mistakes that we make. We think we're the one doing it and we work so hard. And then let's say it doesn't manifest right immediately. And then we're like, I'm just so tired of this. It's not working. And so I can't do anything else. And all of a sudden we're back into planting into the soil the seed of doubt, the seed of frustration, the seed of anger, the seed of this stuff doesn't work anyway. And the universe just says, yes, okay. If that's the experience you want to have, I'll make sure you have frustrating experiences. Oh, it doesn't work anyway. Well, to show you it works, I have to make it not work for the good thing that you're asking for, because you are saying it doesn't work. So I'm going to make sure. So I could keep going with that because I love what that paragraph says, but say your name and your comment.
Hi, my name is JL. Yeah, that one woke me up. It was, so I like when, I don't know if like is the right word, but it's interesting when Ernest Holmes quotes, paraphrases Bible scriptures somewhat. Yes. It's a conflict internally with me when I hear them sometimes, but the way it's explained helps me have a deeper understanding on a metaphysical sense of what it means. So on that quote, and I'm going to quote it wrong, but it was, the Father is greater than I am. I think it was the quote that was in there. And I think I remember reading that, and, a lot of religions talk about a trinity, right? Like this one is greater than that one, and there's this hierarchy. Well, for me now in this journey, I'm starting to realize more and more and more how important it is not to forget that the little I, is not in control of what's happening. And that it's bigger than me, right? And I think that's the part where the universe will, I wouldn't say tap out, but it will have to remind you, no, this is not just through your strength. It's through strength way bigger than you. But you can be a part of it. You can collaborate with it. You can join it in the journey. But you're not the I, the big I.
That is so lovely. And two things you said, if I can remember them both and talk a little bit or expand on them a little bit. One is the reference to how Ernest Holmes will either quote biblical scripture or put in the comment that's paraphrasing a scripture that is pretty commonly known. And so it always tickles me, actually. Sometimes it frustrates me, but most of the time it tickles me when people who are involved in science of mind will be like, the Bible, right? Or I don't like the Bible, or I don't, read the Bible. You can't read 10 or 12 pages in the Science of Mind textbook without Ernest Holmes referring to the Bible and giving what JL described, the metaphysical context for understanding, using, and applying ancient wisdom. Ancient wisdom that the mystics have demonstrated or held up for us century after century after century. And so, one, I just don't want to miss that opportunity because understanding the Bible from a metaphysical, beyond the physical, and beyond the dogma of a specific group is very powerful. Very, very powerful. And if you ever have the opportunity to take either Old Testament and New Thought or New Testament and New Thought from Dr. Petra, do not pass up that opportunity. Borrow the money if you have to. Ask for a scholarship. You will understand the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible and how it applies like you have never understood it before. And I knew if I started there was a risk that I would forget the second piece, but I think it was, that I as an individual, a human being, that I can't do it by my strength alone. Like, I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm powerful, I'm gonna make this happen. But what JL reminded us of, which was so crucial, is that we do it in collaboration with, in co-creation with spiritual law, the absolute law that if we get in alignment with how it works, then it works for us and with us to move us in a direction. So let's jump online. We've got something online, and then we'll come over to Julia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a question I'm going to ask, and we can go to Julia, and then I'll come back over here to Jeff, who's online with us. And I also do want to mention I did take that class with Petra, and it was absolutely wonderful. And also another way is you can volunteer as a tech assistant for these classes, and if you're interested in doing that, you can hit up communications@CSLDallas.org, and I'll get you enlisted in that program too. So here's the question. We say we have I'm going to mispronounce this. We say we have volition and choice, and we create our reality, while at the same time, if something undesirable happens, it must be the law of averages, something unconscious, or the global race consciousness. Can it be that both are true?
Absolutely. It means, not can it mean, it does mean that both are true. And let me do a slight correction with that wording. There is nothing that we teach that says, if things are going well, we did it, I did it. And if things aren't going well, it's y'all who did it with your collective consciousness. It's your fault. No, we don't do that. That is not what we teach. What we teach is that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what happens, that's where we have choice. We have choice about how we respond to what's ever going on. We also do teach that everything that happens, we don't teach it quite like this, but the way that I always remember it is everything that happens is answered prayer. And so it could be answering my individual prayer, or it could be answering the prayer of the law of averages or collective consciousness, but it's not choosing A or B. All of it, all the time, is intermingled. And so the example I gave a little earlier, and I'm so grateful for the person in the room who had that look on their face of like, what? Because some things that we didn't personally ask for or envision unfolding in a certain way happen. And they are absolutely an answer to the prayer that I've been praying or the thoughts that I've been thinking. So it is not okay for us to immediately assume when something quote unquote bad is happening that it's not our quote unquote fault. I guess that's one of the reasons why I don't even use fault so much. I use cause and effect, right? What is the cause and what is the effect? or this is the effect of some mental cause or mental pattern. So we're going to go to this in a minute, but it's like coming out of my mouth. So some of you who are Facebook friends know that yesterday I could have said, well, this is bad. This is not what I ordered. I was scheduled to be on a flight at 2 p.m., be back in Dallas at 4 p.m., 4:30-ish, something like that. And I had my evening all planned, and I was going to be refreshed and ready to be here this morning with checking off all the things that needed to be done by yesterday. And I was on my way to the airport in Chicago and got a text message that my flight was delayed. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, it's an early flight. I'll still get home. Nah. 10 minutes later, I get a text message that my flight has been canceled. That's slightly different. But I know there are flights to Dallas from there, you know, like there are 6 or 7 the rest of the day. No big deal. 10 minutes after that, or 15 minutes after that, I get a text saying, we've automatically rebooked you. Yay! For 9 p.m. Okay. Sunday night. Whoa. I did not plan that. I did not order that. I had everything all set up. I've done my spiritual work all week. I've been a good religious scientist all week, I promise. I was even in Chicago with a meeting of people from New Thought, from all the different groups in New Thought. So I know I'm prayed up. This can't be happening to me. I could easily have said, what's in the collective consciousness? Whose fault is it? Why is this happening? But that's not what I did. It was an answer to prayer in some way. On a physical plane, it was the effect of there being thunderstorms for hours in the Chicago area, and so many planes were delayed and couldn't come in, right? There's that physical stuff that's going on too, but nobody's at fault. But you do notice I'm here this morning, right? Yeah. So if you want to hear the rest of the story, I don't know, but it's going to be in a talk in August. So, Ryan. Oh, no,
Yeah,
Julia.
no, yeah.
Julia's holding up the microphone.
But before we go to Julia, I was going to say that's the all y'all consciousness that we're referring to. It was all y'all. Right? We're from Texas, everybody. It's different. It's pronounced differently in other places that you go, but it's the all y'all philosophy. All right, Julia, you want to go ahead?
Yes. Good morning. This is Julia, and I hope I remember what I was thinking about. But I know what you mean. I've had those moments. Well, there are two different things. The first one is that thinking about what we're talking about today, and the power of the essence of who God is and who created us. We are truly His masterpiece. And one of the things that has helped me as a new person to Science of Mind is this little booklet called This Thing Called You.
Yes.
I mean, I tell you, get the book. It will teach you the essence of God's creation to you as a person, as a human being. And it's just awesome to read the different chapters and then these little prayers that you can do almost every day to help you build that understanding from the inside, not from the outside, because everything in Science of Mind must come from the inside.
Yes.
And secondly, keeping it short, is that as far as the Christ consciousness, one of the things that really pushed me on this journey of understanding was that as a pastor, I'm doing the New Testament study. And in going through the time of Jesus and his teachings, I'm sitting there and I'm realizing that He is talking to me as a sister, as a human being, that I am just like Him. Of course, I didn't share that with too many people because they think I'm crazy. But that was such a release and an insight that changed my life forever, because that energy is so powerful when you really get to sit and read his teachings and really know where they're coming from. It's like nothing else.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree with you of the powerness of that teaching. And it has nothing to do with the Bible. It's him as a human being blossoming as God's creation. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and so in Science of Mind and in Centers for Spiritual Living, we teach that Jesus is the example of what can be done when you apply spiritual principle in your life consistently, and not the exception. That while Jesus is the way shower, the example, that all these things I do, you can do too, and more, is in the Bible for a reason. And it's spiritual principles. So the Bible is not the only place. If you read the mystics in many different traditions, that same message is there. And often it is connected to the I am, the I am. It's fascinating. One of the reasons that we have a pattern with pronouns is that we are careful about when we find ourselves using gender-focused pronouns, and that for some people, especially when they're newer or when they have not had a positive experience in a more traditional background, that using the he or the him, right, even though sometimes we'll use she and her to describe this infinite intelligence that has no form and has no limitation, that sometimes it continues to give people a subconscious connection to a patriarchal system. Those of us who've been in the program or in the pattern or in the study of Science of Mind for a long time don't get distracted by he or him or any kind of form. But typically what people say is, why do you say you're talking about God and you say it instead of he with a capital H? No, it with a capital I, because it has no form, it has no gender, it has no limit. So we can use any of those, and that you will hear it different ways. So do we have something else online? We've got about 5 more minutes.
Well, we did, but I'll see if Jeff, do you want to go ahead? Yes. All right. If you want to unmute yourself, Jeff, and join the conversation.
Hi.
I want to thank you, first of all, for your what I felt was an emotional beginning to this thing, and I think 45, just as it's an aside, I think 45 minutes for this kind of class is just when we get into the juicy stuff, we got to go here. But anyhow, and the other comment is, I thought when we have talks, it's supposed to be confidential. You're not supposed to be sharing it with the world, about my stuff. But you talk exactly. I guess the point I'm trying to make or want to make is, I'm noticing in my own spiritual growth pattern that I looking over the last 4.5 years, it's kind of like, hey, this stuff is kind of interesting. This is very new to me. That's interesting. And okay, I'll try it, blah, blah, blah. And keep learning, keep taking courses. And as you know, last year I thought I was doing everything right. And, we had this conversation. And it's like, I did everything. I was a good boy. I followed all the rules. I did everything. And where is the fruit? Where is the fruit? I planted that tomato seeds like 2 weeks ago. Why I'm expecting to see big, huge tomatoes. And then once I got over that, I kind of settled down. And then I started to, interesting enough, Tara Brach, I was listening to one of her meditations, and what she said was something like, your deepest desire. And that really touched me emotionally. And all of a sudden I started applying that to my prayer, Science of Mind prayer. And it's like I'm becoming conscious of, I do that. This is what I do. That used to be unconscious. Now I'm conscious of praying and expecting the next day. And now I'm learning to just, okay, this is part of my process. This is part of being Jeff, I guess. And it's becoming much more fruitful and much more meaningful. And the course I'm taking with the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, it's amazing, really, to learn all this philosophical stuff about evolution and involution and all that stuff, and it's all kind of coming together in a very strange and beautiful way. So, and thank you for sharing being human too. Sometimes I put practitioners up on a pedestal. I go, this can't possibly happen to you. But then when I hear Petra and see her tears and hearing you today, it's a beautiful affirmation to me that, we all use the pencils with the erasers on them.
Jeff, that's beautiful, and thank you. And yeah, if I'm telling your story, I'm telling my story, and Petra's story, and John Smith's story, and Susie's story, because we all are in the journey of being human and recognizing we can bring spiritual principle and spiritual practice to the forefront in order to, as CSL says, create a world that works for everyone. And as we at CSL Dallas say, create a world that works for everyone and a life that works for me. Our time is up, and yeah, Jeff, you're right. We have 45 minutes, and just when it gets juicy, it's like, oh, we have to get ready to go into our Sunday celebration service. But I think that's brilliant, because then maybe you'll come back next week in person or online as we pick up on page 418 in the top. My request for you this week is that you join me in paying attention to what is it that we are actually claiming, and how can we keep clear between our individual commitment and the false belief that as a human being we are actually controlling the universe. So my name is Tracy Brown. That is the Sunday morning Science Mind class at CSL Dallas. Please join us in about 25 minutes in the sanctuary for our service, celebration service, featuring Michael Brundy. Have a good week, everybody.